Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Stephen Waters, and today we will be, due to the corona thing, I've decided to take up a hobby. And I thought, I feel like, well, what should I do for this hobby? Well, as for most cinema fans would have known, in April, the release of the 25th Bond film and Daniel Craig's final outing in James Bond Die Another Day, No Time to Die, would be released. And so, because of that, and my fascination for the Bond franchise and anything James Bond really, I decided, well, let's do some Bond videos, Bond lists of my love and fascination for this series. So, as a result, I've gone through. So, let's begin my very first video, and the video would be, of course, the complete rankings, which I've got in pieces of paper here, of all the 24 current Bond films from Eon. The unofficials won't be included, though I highly recommend don't even bother unless you're a true hardcore Bond fan to at least view what it is. And these are my personal opinions. It's just purely subjective, and I feel that every Bond fan should definitely have that in them to view films, and that purely based on what they like. So let's begin the list. And I'm not going to go too in depth with each film because after this I'm going to be doing a new review of each film individually, see what they are, and see if my opinions on them have changed after rewatching it, and then at the end we'll do a completely new relisting to see how my opinions have changed. So let's begin the list. Starting with number 24, and it's Quantum of Solace. Let's be honest, Quantum of Solace is one of those films that had a lot of expectations to live up to, and it sadly didn't execute well. What are the reasons? Well, the storyline was so set up well, but it didn't execute right. Although this is not entirely the filmmaker's fault, there was a strikers' right going around the time of filmmaking, so that's not entirely their fault, really. The editing was far too over the place. The color brown was shown everywhere, which I guess helped it stand out, but it also just made the film bland and basic action. This is Daniel Craig's second film, and in my opinion, despite how bad the film is, he is truly great. Judi Dench, a really great M, and the actor, and the Bill Tanner that is a part of the Daniel Craig series from this film onward was great, and it's easy to see why. He's perhaps one of those just many supporting characters, just happens to stand out. Some bad things. Despite that, the bad things is Dominic Green, not a very memorable villain, and Elvis the henchman. First off, I could just go on what's so bad about Elvis. I mean, you give a henchman named Elvis, and he doesn't look like Mr. Presley himself. And he's just there, he has no gimmick, nothing that makes him stand out. Dominic Green is just too much of a slimy businessman. And nothing against the actors that played these villains. I don't blame the actors. I just find that the story written behind these guys just weren't done as well. And I wanted Mr. White to have been the main villain of Quantum. I thought that would have made, that's what I would have liked. Anyway, Quantum is one of those films I have to be in a really good mood to come back to. And I will admit, Quantum and the next film on the list that I'm going to say shortly, I dislike the most because they follow such a great storyline and fail, in my opinion, badly to lift, because they could have had these could have been really good films, but they didn't do the storylines justice, and this is what we've gotten, which is a real shame. But anyway, Quantum is an okay film. It's clearly influenced too much of the Bourne era and less of Bond eccentricities, which honestly that's how you describe Quantum, being too much of a Bourne film than a Bond film. Anyway, what's next on the list? Number 23, Diamonds Are Forever. This was Sean Connery's final film with Eon, and like I said, this film just not really great. It feels like it's a 60s film. It's literally a 60s film made in the early 70s, and it's lost all that spark that the Connery films by this point had. Connery himself does a really good performance here, performance here. I like Tiffany Case, played by St. Jones. I felt that she was really good, and she's not like one of my top 10 Bond girls. I will be frank, but she's definitely one of the just ones I just like enjoy seeing. I guess what's a kind of problem with her Bond girl is she starts self-confident, independent, then eventually becomes like a bimbo by midway, of the film, which actually becomes a sort of character trait with certain Bond girls in the series, which is a real shame that that's even the case. But I do got to admit, the actress in question, she does play the role it's written, and I do like how you see in documentaries, she just finds it an honor to even be a Bond girl, and she just likes that she got to be a part of it, part of the series, which again makes me really like her. I can't deny that. The storyline does feel a bit weak. Like I said, it came after On Her Majesty's, which is one of the greatest Bond films, just like Casino Royale of 2006, and those two films ended with such a shock, and opened up for a possible sequel, literally direct sequel. But they didn't do that as well. Instead, it's more like, Connery. It doesn't even acknowledge the events of that film. The henchmen, Mr. Witt and Mr. Kidd. First off, I really find them fun. They're really fun, quirky villains. They are pretty much a duo team hitman, like a duo team of hitmen, and they happen to be gay. Okay, something interesting, something different. The same can't be said for the villain, who is, again, this is Blofeld again. Again, as we all know, in the Bond series, Blofeld was the main villain throughout the majority of the 60s, and this one early 70s film with Connery, and technically had a sort of cameo in a Roger Moore film in the series. But Charles Gray as Blofeld. Now, I'm not saying Charles Gray plays the performance badly. He does what it's written, I can say that. And I do admit, I do like some of his lines. He is good, but he just doesn't fit Blofeld for me. And another thing I also don't like is the whole body doubles. It makes sense, I get it, but I would have liked it could have been executed far better, And the budget for this film kind of feels like it's not that fantastical. But then again, when you find out behind the scenes, for Connery to come back for this film, I'll explain later in the list when we reach a certain film. I think most of us Bond fans know why. When he agreed to come back for Diamonds, he asked a far bigger salary. And so that kind of strained the production a bit of the budget. But he didn't come for this film solely for the money. In fact, majority of the salary he got for this film, Connery gave to a charity. So he didn't come all for money, which I really appreciate. And overall, this just seems like a really bad film for Connery to go out on the series, considering he's the one that started it all. So that's why again, these two I don't really have much fun for, because my reasons are said. Those are my reasons. Anyway, number 22. The Man with the Golden Gun. Roger Moore's second Bond film. Then what can I say? I do like the opening to this film. I really do. It sets up the villains, their character dynamics perfectly. And you really know the Bond's going to be in for something. The opening. The main song, not so good. In fact, if I could be honest, for some of these three films, their main song aren't that great. If I could be honest. Miss Goodnight, an okay Bond girl, kind of annoying, but okay. And Roger Moore. So how is he in this film? Well, first off, Roger Moore's pretty good. I mean, it's clear when you watch his first two Bond films. This is his second. He's still kind of struggling to find out what works for him. And this is the film where a lot of the Connery aspects are in his Bond. And so yeah, things just come across. Maud Adams appears in this as the Bond villain's mistress. I always find that her and Roger Moore always had great chemistry. An interesting fact, she will return in a later Bond film as the main Bond girl, which of course we'll later get to on the list. Now the villains. Nick Nack is a rather interesting henchman. Not only that he's a midget, but just how he's done. It's clear that he's loyal to his master, but he's also willing to betray him if it means getting this huge estate, the island, the money. So I find that really interesting. And of course, Scaramanga, the man with the golden gun. Played by legendary actor Christopher Lee. First off, you can't go wrong with that type of casting. In fact, for many people in the series, we can agree, though the film's not so good, he is one of the greatest villains ever in the series, and one of the greatest villains in the film, along with Nick Nack. I guess what I like about him is, again, he's completely different from the book, as in the book, he's more of a thug. Here, he's more of a refined, elegant man. He can be a bit cracked at the moment. This is how I interpret him, but he's this refined, sort of gentleman killer. He views himself as an absolute superior marksman, and he is, but he needs to have that one. But he feels like he needs this one kill that will really solidify his reputation. And he's always training himself to be at the best fit. The golden bullet gimmick, for some reason, it instills fear. Because you know, if you get shot by that, you're dead. And in fact, he never misses a target. Something really interesting. And he almost has this sort of friendship / rivalry and respect for Bond. So again, Christopher Lee is one of the many reasons I like about this film. And the film is just worth watching just to watch him. In fact, I find that some of even the worst Bond films have some of the best villains and best certain. And this film is also well known for the car stunt. Despite the bad sound effect, it is still an impressive stunt. And I do like the climax between Bond and Scaramanga. I find that to be really fun and entertainable to watch. Number 21, A View to a Kill. Here we go from Moore's second to Moore's last. And it's clear by this film, Moore was old. When you see this film, that's clearly the thing. And just like Diamonds Are Forever, when it came to this film, all the energy that actor brought to their films and the series was completely gone. I thought he should have left after this film, and someone else should have taken over. This film was clearly was heavily adapted of the 80s. And the action sequences are okay. The climax of the villain I actually liked. And more, again, the old age thing is a offsetter for me. But are there any good things about this film, if I'm being so negative? Well, there is. Just like with The Man with the Golden Gun, A View to a Kill has some of the best villains in the series. Max Zorin, played by legendary Christopher Walken, and Mayday as the henchwoman. Again, very unique to the series. I think Max Zorin takes the cake as being the most psychotic Bond villain ever. And Mayday, certainly a very interesting one. She's first off, she's a woman that's really strong. That's more something that the male henchmen's had. So I find it a bit of a different mix-up. And herself, Jones really just nails the role here. And Christopher Walken just nails his performance. Now, the main Bond girl, Stacey here, geez, one of the worst in the series, and one I just can't stand. Overall, it has some decent action. It's at least far better put together film than Man with the Golden Gun. And in my opinion, the villain Max Zorin is far better than Scaramanga. I'm not saying Christopher Lee was terrible in his film. I just find this villain far more interesting to me and a little bit more my taste, because I prefer my villains to be more completely deranged and psychotic, and this one is. And his death is far more interesting and far better than Scaramanga's. Although Scaramanga's death made sense, I preferred Max Zorin's death way better. And Mayday's death is pretty good too. And I like how her character changed. I really do like, I really do like bits about this film, but it's clear that the Roger Moore film series of Bond films were done, and they needed to desperately do something else to save the series. What's next? What have we got next? Number 20. No surprise to anyone, Die Another Day. I find it a bit ironic that the 20th Bond film ever made is at number 20. Sorry, it's just a little fun. Anyway, this is the film that many fans consider truly killed the franchise. not well, almost derailed the franchise. It was a huge. All these films have proven to be big box office successes, but despite that, not so good critically. So what's so bad about this film? Well, the opening is pretty promising. Bond being captured, tortured, released, finding out he's been betrayed, and has to hunt for revenge for the person who sold him out. Good. It's how they handle it is bad. Too over the top, and the villain's not that interesting. In fact, eye-rolling, if I could be honest. Not as bad as Dominic Green, but damn, bad. And the too much CGI is the problem. Pierce Brosnan, despite this being in this film, his last, and how it's done, I really felt that Pierce really did best with what he was given. Jinx, played by Halle Berry, okay. Not terrible, not great, okay. Other villains here are kind of eye-rolling, weird. In fact, it's just too much of a spoof film, considering it's literally a Bond film in the Bond continuity. How the hell does that happen? Are there good things? Well, the action sequence in the beginning is really great. Some of the action sequence that goes on is pretty great. The CGI stuff, not my favorite thing of all in the series. And what else? The invisible car, I actually like. I like the invisible car. Again, you can take it for what you want. I mean, if you have an underwater car, invisible car doesn't sound too much far of a stretch for me. Another thing I also got to admit, it's a 40th anniversary film, so there's a lot of references. So I kind of like that. But the problem is there's too much references that it's not even unique at all. No original, so yeah, kind of sad, really. Anyway, this will be Pierce Brosnan's last film. And after this film, the series really needed to rethink to save the series. And so, yeah, I have huge nostalgia for this film. It's one of my very first Bond films I ever saw. But I guess over time, the taste of this film has kind of been sour for me. I guess that's probably one of the main reasons why I don't really have a huge fond of this film. Anyway, let's continue with our list. At number 19, another Pierce Brosnan film, and his second, Tomorrow Never Dies. Now, I kind of like this film. I really do. The idea of a media mogul and manipulating the media, to start a war for ratings and storylines is pretty good villain plot, and something that could really work today. Jonathan Pryce as the villain Elliot Carver, a really great casting choice, and he just steals the show in every scene he's in. The villain Stamper, kind of a bit generic number Bond henchman. I mean, strong, tall, fit, blonde hair. Yeah. Those were the henchmen in the series before Craig came along. Pierce Brosnan does the role fantastically. I like his haircut in this film. In fact, that's probably the main reason I like this film. That this film did change his haircut. So yeah, it's a fun action film. Far better than Quantum, but it still has a lot of the Bond eccentricities. And Pierce Brosnan does do a really good job here, and he really shows his range of being, emotional. Let's all agree. We can all agree that Pierce Brosnan just played Bond as Bond and didn't bring anything new to the series. But that's okay. This is what we wanted at the time. And this action film was fun. It was a huge box office success, and it brought another famous Bond girl, Wei Lin, who I found to be pretty fun Bond girl in the series. Anyway, this film is just a fun action. It's just fun action 90s film, which everyone can get on board with. But after this, they felt too much action for the next film. Let's do something different. But we'll get to that film later. Anyway, following will be the last Bond film of the 70s. Number 18, Moonraker. This is the gold standard for Bond films going over the top. Up to that light top. That's how far we went for this installment. The idea of space, I do like how it's only in the last bit of the film, and it's visually stunning. The opening stunt to the whole film was spectacular. The diving out of the plane, no parachute. Roger Moore still looks fit, still great performance. Hugo Drax, an okay main Bond villain. It's clear that they copied a lot of the stuff from The Spy Who Loved Me, which was ironically directed by the same guy, and the director also directed another Bond film, another Bond film, You Only Live Twice, in the 60s. This is the last film in the 70s, and it was clear it was more inspired by Star Wars. In fact, this film was supposed to be for your eyes only, but it didn't end up happening because of the success of Star Wars, so I decided to do the space theming. Overall, it's just way too over the top. I really do like how it's a beautifully stunning film. You can really see that all the money is on this film, the special effects, and I do like how this is one of the few times where a henchman returns from a previous film, Jaws, and I really like Jaws. Jaws was great, and I do like how this film does a different interpretation, because if you keep doing the same thing, not going to be so great all the time. So I kind of like it was done differently, but it was also done terribly. I will admit that. Anyway, just give it a watch. It's definitely a film worth watching, but if it's too over the top, too corny, you're probably not going to like it. Roger Moore really does this film great. And it's also an interesting fact, the last time we see Bernard Lee in a Bond film, the guy who played M for many of the series, sadly, this will be his last time playing M in the role, and it's a real shame. Coming up at number 17 is The Living Daylights. Timothy Dalton's first outing, and he goes off with a bang. This film is great. It's a classic spy thriller. Really great, really done well, and Timothy Dalton, really great. He gives a really different performance. However, he does have one weak spot. The comedy, the witty one-liners. But hey, what we got is something different, and I like it. It's something different. And you had to do this. You couldn't keep doing Roger Moore as it was getting boring, it was getting tiresome. This was the way to go. And overall, it's just a really good story. The main Bond girl here is definitely an interesting one. She's independent, tough, but she can also be a bit naive. And she complements Timothy Dalton's darkness, I must admit, and I find her really fun. The villains here aren't so great. Another blonde henchman. And the main villain here, not so good. Brad Whitaker could have had potential to be a really great Bond villain. Think about it. A Bond villain obsessed with the military. That would have been a really fun character for me. But no, it just doesn't go well. Overall, this is a really fun film. And that's all I can say. That's all I can say, really. Or say, really. Well, I would like to complete the rest of this list, and I will. But that's how we've gotten so far. Join me next time we complete the remaining list. There will be 3 parts of this whole ranking thing. And the second will be coming out shortly. So, when we come back, which film is at number 16? Which is my favorite? Which makes the top 5 or top 10? We'll find out when Stephen Waters returns.